Awesome, awesome, awesome. I'm so excited today that we get a chance to talk with the Mr. Rob Ekno again, but this time a much needed conversation. Not that the other ones aren't, but let me tell you, there is something about, especially what we're seeing in society now, where people are utilizing so many negative coping mechanisms in order to deal with things that they haven't been able to deal with when it comes to childhood trauma, when it comes to mental illness, when it comes to generational habits, all the stuff. And so we're going to have an amazing conversation today about the yes that he gave God, the yes that he gave himself, and how that yes has affected other people. So, Rob, welcome to the show again.
Oh, thanks for having me here. I'll tell you what, this is, while you were sharing that, I could just feel the goodness. I don't know, it's the Holy Spirit, whatever it is, was just oozing through me. Like we're in this amazing positive atmosphere. And, I share that because when I used to live out on the streets, it wasn't all that positive. Let's just say that.
Awesome. So let's start there then. What took you to the streets?
Well, it was, I grew up in southern New England in a small town in Rhode Island. I went to a nice high school, lived in a nice middle-class family, a nice middle-class neighborhood. And then drinking age at that time was only 18. And somehow at 16, I looked old enough. And so I became the guy that was buying and it was this crazy stuff way back when, Boone's Farm wine.
I remember Boone's Farm. I remember Boone's Farm.
If you're around the Nashville area and you're a little bit older, you might remember the Boone's Farm, right? It was happy days and mellow nights, right? And all this. So I was buying that, and, I started getting a little drunk on the weekends, and we thought it was a cool thing, right? And luckily, nothing major happened to any of us. And then I went off to college in Massachusetts, to a community college, and I somehow became the class president. Nobody knew. And so on Monday nights, we would have two poker games going. We rented a house just over the border in New Hampshire, and we had two poker games going, and they would whittle down as the night went on. And we'd have a keg of beer, and we'd be all betting on Monday Night Football. And guys would lose playing poker, and the tables would whittle down. But we'd be going until like 7 in the morning.
Wow!
And classes started at 8, and I'm the class president.
Oh my!
And guys would lose money betting, with the bookies or whatever on football, and they would go into the financial aid office to take out loans to pay off the bookie. I mean, it was crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy. And I graduated. How I graduated, I do not know. I think it was because I was also the editor of the sports pages of our little local, college page, and racquetball was a huge thing at that time. So I would just Mr. Smith, did really well at the racquetball court this week. He beat Mr. Jones, and Mr. Jones wasn't one of my teachers, so it didn't matter, right? and so I skated by, right, and there I am. Then I'm giving the valedictorian message and stuff, and crazy. And then I went into a 4-year college, and one thing led to another. I ended up on the radio, and I ended up getting 2 shifts, a morning shift and an afternoon shift. So I dropped out of college because I said, well, I'm already going to college. The point is to graduate so I can get a job on the radio or TV. Well, I'm already working on the radio or TV, so why go to college? So I don't even tell them I'm dropping out. I just drop out.
Wow.
One thing led to another. I worked at a nightclub at night on top of that, spinning records. That nightclub owned a adult nightclub as well. Their DJ quit one day. They asked me to fill in during the days, and I end up getting fired from the radio stations. Now I'm working at this little Mexican restaurant and a strip club during the day. That's where I learned, was introduced to cocaine, and the party was on. It was crazy. So here was this guy who grew up in a nice neighborhood with, parents, there'd been some divorces and stuff, but it was still, everything was working out. Mm-hmm. I go to college and things are seemingly moving forward. And the next thing you know, I'm the DJ for all these spiritually sick women, unfortunately. Right. And now as you grow older, and it's like, it's not such the cool thing that you thought when you were 23. And then what it was in Massachusetts because Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut are all kind of together, right? And they're all kind of small, and you know your neighbors kind of a lot, you know, and stuff. So the girls in Rhode Island, for instance, they didn't want to be strippers in Rhode Island because their neighbor might walk in or whatever. So they would go to Massachusetts or Connecticut and vice versa. So every week on Monday, the ladies were looking for a place to stay. And at the time, way back when, it was $42 a night at this place called the Thunderbird Motel down the street. Well, Robbie, being the good man of God that I was, I said, ladies, no need to pay $42 a night. You can just stay with Robbie for the week.
Wow.
At 23, I think I'm the greatest guy on planet Earth living the greatest life, right? I'm the envy of everybody. I have a naked woman in my bed every week, and I've got cocaine going, and they're buying me drinks, and it's the next week it's somebody else, and I'm the DJ, so they're all looking up to me. Oh, my gosh. Wow. You know, even talking about it now, but everything that I went through led me to finally say yes one day to the Lord when he said, are you ready to stop?
Wow.
Right? It's like we have to go through. Moses went through what he went through. David went, Joseph went, they all, you know, Paul.
Oh, my.
Right? We got to get to where, got to go through the testimonies, as crazy as they may sound. So eventually, I still ended up being a nationally syndicated sportscaster. I was broadcasting out of Boston on a big station out of Boston. I was in the Garden with Larry Bird, Magic Johnson. I was covering World Series. I was at, the games. I was at Fenway Park on the field before the games. I was at the Boston Garden with the Bruins and all of this stuff. And the next thing you know, I'm asking my mother to put me on a Greyhound bus so I can go. I didn't want to sleep on the park benches in Rhode Island, during the wintertime. And my mother was gracious enough to let me stay in her basement, but I had bought a house. I made a $35,000 profit in 1 year's time, and I ended up snorting it all away.
Wow.
And I had nothing left, and I didn't want to keep answering questions of what happened. I don't want to tell you what happened. And how crazy it is. In my book here, this is an award-winning book from 2024, for addiction and recovery called Cruising Toward Heaven, Navigating from Rough Seas to Miraculous Adventures. I eventually ended up on a private cruise ship in Alaska, so we wrote this story. But this is my life's testimony from having stuff to losing stuff to my brother dying, all kinds of stuff along the way, and it's just my story. And it's I get texts and stuff from people that are using this as part of their recovery program. And it's a kind of a cool thing to use, because who would ever think that Cruising Toward Heaven, Navigating from Rough Seas to Miraculous Adventures was anything to do with recovery.
Right.
So, and I say that because so many people are like, Rob, my son, my daughter, they're 14, 15, 16 years old, and they're going through struggles, and I can't get them to do anything. And I'm like, at least leave this on the counter somewhere. Because if they start reading it, I write just as I'm talking to you. Right?
So good.
No sophisticated words in this book, Taffiney.
So good.
But seriously, it's just me telling my story for you to relate. And so anyways, so I end up losing this career. I end up on the streets of Fort Lauderdale, living out of the Greyhound bus station. And then what's funny is as you see this beautiful chrome dome, right? While I'm bald, while I'm homeless, right before that, I started with a hairpiece wearing in Rhode Island. Well, now I get living on the streets. I don't have money to pay for the upkeep and all this every week. I literally answered an ad. The story is in this book. It says headline news. And so I answer an ad in one of these free papers in front of one of the convenience stores they used to have way back when. And it said, we're looking for a model for our next commercial or infomercial about, hair replacement systems. Here I am homeless. I take a bus over to Pompano Beach area, and I go into this place, and literally they hire me on the spot to be their main model for the guy on TV. And it's like, hey, this is Rob. Rob has no hair, as you can see. But in the next 30 minutes, we're going to make him look like a Hollywood movie star. And so they put this thing on my head. And then they had, this big famous guy, Jose Iber, come down from Beverly Hills, and they were doing conventions for hairstylists and showing them how good a hairpiece could look and all this. And I wore that sucker for 18 years.
Wow.
And I got a job. Eventually, I ended up getting sober. I got stopped. I got back to Rhode Island. I got stopped on November 28, 1992. And they arrested me for DUI, and I looked at my ex-girlfriend that came in, Sherry, at 4:30 in the morning. Why she answered the phone, I have no idea. That was a blessing in itself.
Wow.
And she was about 20 feet away from me. They put me in the lobby and said, all right, we're done with you. They held me in the jail cell for a couple hours to sober up. And she comes in and I said, I can't do this anymore. I said, I'm homeless. I'm living out of my friend's basement. And she looks at me and she goes, I can smell you from here.
Wow.
And I'm like, so here's the thing. Talk about saying yes to Jesus. Several years earlier, when I was 10 years old in Rhode Island, I was an acolyte at my Episcopal church in Coventry, Rhode Island. One day I decided that I wanted to get some baseball cards or something. So I took the collection plate once it went around everybody, and I brought it into the sacristy, and I looked around. Oh, the pastor, he's up there preaching away, and nobody's over there. So I borrowed $2 from Jesus without asking, and I grabbed it up my robe, down my pants, so I could go buy some baseball cards or something, right? So I thought for the next 23 years that why I had a drinking and drugging career was because Jesus was punishing me for stealing that $2.
Wow.
Now, you and I both know, and our friends watching at home that have Christian values know that he forgave me the second I thought about taking it.
Yeah.
Not even while I was taking her after. The second my mind said that, he's like, I forgive you, my son.
Right.
But I didn't know that. So I ran in and out of churches for many, many years. I ran away at one point for 9 years thinking, this God guy, he's, forget about this guy. So here's the thing. I have 28 days sober now. I'm staying in a friend's basement in Rhode Island. Steve, wonderful story in here. And he was only minutes away from that church. So it's Christmas Eve night. I have 28 days sober. I got a couple of dollars in my pocket, not a whole lot. And a guy comes over, one of my old partying buddies, and he says, hey, dude, I got stuff. Let's party. And I'm like, no. Steve's letting me borrow his truck. I got to go to midnight mass. I said, I've been sober 28 days. I said, I don't know what's gotten a hold of me, but Jesus is calling me to be at that church tonight, and I've got to pay back the $2
Wow.
that I took. Now, I drive up to the church. It's about a 15-minute drive. I pull in a parking lot. I'm by myself, and they've got candles all around the church. It's all beautifully lit up and everything. And I've got a $5 bill in my pocket. And I'm looking at that thing, and I pull it out. I look at it. I said, Lord, I don't know how much interest there is on $2 over 23 years, but I got $5.
Wow.
Taffiney, the story is in this book. I go in there. I sit down. 300 people in this thing, all the songs playing and all the beautiful poinsettias and all of that stuff. I sit in, it was like the fifth row, so I wasn't way in the back. Do you know that nobody sat in my pew? The entire church was filled, and it was like God was saying to me, I could feel him going, listen, I just want you to remember, I'm not punishing you, but I want you to remember how far I've taken you.
Wow.
From where you were trying to kill yourself all those years with drugs and alcohol, and now I just want you to just see how much I love you and where you're at now. And so I'm sitting there with this $5 bill, and I kept pulling it out. I'm looking at it, it's still there, $5. And I'm waiting for this collection plate to come by. And finally, it came by, and I just went like this with the $5 bill. And you know what? I have not had a drink or a line of cocaine since the day I gave my $5 to Jesus.
Wow. And
it was just like the lady in the Bible, right? She gave her one, where the other guys kind of, I'll give you a little. And he said, no, I'm going to honor her because she gave her all. Well, that night I gave my all.
Wow.
And I said yes to repaying Jesus. And I have not had a line or a drink of cocaine since.
Wow.
And that was November 28, 1992, was my last So my sobriety date is the 29th, the first clean day that I had.
Wow. So at that time, you had been clean prior to that, and then you made this declaration of yes, or
28 days.
28 days. Wow.
Yep, only 28 days sober.
Wow.
So as I share it to people that are watching, right, a lot of people through Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's Eve, they call it the triangle, right, where it's like so hard to get through. But no, I've been through it now I'm 32 years plus sober.
Wow.
Right? And by the time we air this, it may be 33, right, because I'm only a few weeks away. So in that realm, from saying yes to Jesus. And then the other yes was, so I got a D in high school in English.
Wow.
All right. I actually got an F, and I was not going to pass my senior year. I think the teachers got together and realized that if Rob doesn't know Shakespeare, it's probably not going to affect the world. Let's just get this guy out of here.
Right.
So they voted to give me a D, so I passed. Now all of a sudden, I end up with all these life experiences. I ended up in Hollywood. I ended up in Alaska. I ended up all these experiences that the Lord gave me throughout my sobriety. And then he said to me, I need you to write a book and tell people your story about how I did things for you and how I worked in your life. And I literally said, Lord, you do realize I got a D in English in high school. I was a homeless alcoholic and cocaine addict, right? And you want me to tell my story? He said, that's what I asked you, isn't it?
Right.
And I was like, okay. And I said, so I didn't say yes right away. I said, Lord, of course, I was the typical, doubting Thomas,
100%.
right? Said, Lord, I don't have a copy editor. I don't have a book designer. I said, I don't have a proofreader. I have nothing. You want me to write my story? He said, Rob, literally, the Lord's talking to me. He said, did I ask you if you had any of that? He said, what did I ask you to do? I said, you asked me to write my story down, and that's all I need you to do. But Lord, no, there's no buts, Rob. I am only asking you to write it down. Okay, so I write my story, and out of the blue, I have this wonderful mentor, David DeBurge, out in Pasadena. And David was working at one of the big studios as an international marketing director and stuff, and he was helping me with some other stuff. And I said, Lord, well, I've written this book now for a year and a half. I said, I can't publish it. I said, look, I don't even know where a comma goes still in a semicolon. Nobody's going to read this, right? And he goes, call your friend David.
Uh-huh.
I said, call my friend David. He's an international marketing director. What am I going to call him? He says, Rob, would you call David? So I called David. I said, Dave, how you doing? He goes, hey, you know what? The studio just had a huge layoff yesterday. They laid off 200 people, and I was one of them. And I was telling him about my book. He says, well, you know what? I'm not the greatest writer in the world, and I'm pretty darn good. Why don't you come to my house, and I'll help you out? For a year and a half, almost every single week, only if we had something like a doctor's appointment, David gave me 4 free hours every single week to help guide me on my book as my writing coach and mentor. For free. Then we get to the end, and he designed the cover. And then we get to the end, and I'm like, Dave, I said, I know you're pretty good and I'm pretty good, but I think it would be, before we publish this, we should probably get a copy editor. He goes, yeah, that would be a good idea. So I go back to my apartment I was in North Hollywood, right near Universal Studios Hollywood, and I'm standing outside that night, and I'm just looking around, and my neighbor, Megan, comes out. And she says, how you doing? I'm like, great. And we had never really had a conversation. Mm-hmm. And so there was some cats running around. We're looking at the cats. And I said, yeah, I'm doing okay, but I'm a little bummed out. She goes, why is that? I said, I've been writing this book that God asked me to write for about a year and a half now. And I said, I can't publish it. She said, why not? I said, well, I don't have a copy editor. And I had just gotten hurt on a boating injury. And so I was like, I'm out of work. I don't have money. I don't have $5,000, $6,000 to pay a copy editor. She goes, well, why don't you just give it to me? And I said, why would I give it to you? And she said, don't you know what I do for a living? I said, no. She goes, do you know why I work out of my apartment now? I said, no. She goes, I worked at a publishing house for 30 years as a copy editor, and now I have my own business, and I do all this stuff for doctors and lawyers and all this. She says, I work until 5 every day, but I'll be happy to bless you, and I'll edit your book for free. She said, but you just have to wait a couple of weeks. It's going to take me a little bit of time because I got a big project I'm on right now. So I give it to her. she gives it back to me, and I don't think she was a God type of person. She was more, like a Buddha or something along those lines, more in that realm. And she gives it back to me, and she goes, I actually really enjoyed reading this book. She goes, why don't you make the corrections? So I make the corrections. I said, hey, I told her a couple weeks later, I said, I made all the corrections and blah, blah. She goes, you know what, why don't you give it back to me just so I can double check my work? She goes, because at a publishing house, we always have a minimum of 3 eyes that see any book that goes out the door. So why don't you give it back to me? Gave it back to her. She made some other corrections that she had missed. Give it to her. So now I had the writing coach that God gave me, and then I had the copy editor. And so I call up a friend of mine, Lee, in Northern California. He was a life coach, and I wanted somebody on the back to say something. I didn't want me writing just everything about me. So I said, call him up. I go, hey, Lee, listen, we're friends. If you don't like the manuscript, don't worry. We're friends. But if you like it, could you write like a line or two on the back cover for me so I could have some? He goes, that'd be great. Send me a hard copy manuscript. Because like me, I can't read on a computer like some people.
Right.
I send it up to him 3 days later. He calls me up and he says, Rob, goes, got the manuscript. Thank you very much. He said, by the way, I don't know if I ever told you this, but my wife and I are professional proofreaders. So while I'm reading this book for you, I'll proofread it. And if I see anything, that's my gift to you. And I'm like, he knew all along, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
Right? All I had to say yes was to writing the dang book. Right? So now, on the back cover, I'm like, Lord, I really would love an author, like a professional author. Right? So he goes, call Paul. So I was going to this writers meeting on Monday nights in Pacific Palisades when I was out in L.A., and there's this guy, Paul, who was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. He'd won all kinds of awards traveling around the world in his writing and all this. I'm like, Lord, I said, I know Paul from the meeting, but we're not like, yes, I do have his phone number. And God says, call Paul. So I'm on the freeway, 210 freeway in Pasadena, driving to David's house, right, for my weekly session. And God's like, call Paul. And I said, but God, I can't. Paul's this guy. He said, Rob, you asked me who to call. And again, you're arguing with me. I just need you to call Paul. So I literally pull off the freeway into a little restaurant. I call Paul. I said, hey, Paul, this is Rob. He goes, hey, Rob, I said, listen, I know you mentioned at the meeting that you got some projects, you're kind of busy and stuff like that. Just wondering, you've heard me talk about my book. I was just wondering if it's possible that, you might have time, in a couple of weeks to read it. And if you did, could you write like a line or two? It would be really helpful. He goes, just like this, dude, I am so honored that you called to ask me for this. He goes, I was in your position years ago, and I had the courage to call a famous author, and the famous author said you always help another author out, even if you don't like their genre, their writing style. You know how hard it is to write a book. You know how much effort there is, so you can always say 5 stars about someone because you know the amount of work that goes into it and the courage it takes. He goes, you're right. I do have a couple of things. If you can wait a month, all right. And I'm like, okay, for a Pulitzer-nominated author, I'll wait a month, right? Taffiney, a month later, he sends me a thing, 8 lines. Compares my book to Conversations with God, right?
Wow. And
also another one by another gentleman who was another award-winning author as well. So he compares my book in 8-line paragraph, and my mentor David says, "Well, we don't have enough room on the back cover for that." I said, "Dave, we make room for
exactly. Oh yeah.
But that's how the book got put together. So now you're going to laugh at this, and if you're watching at home, you're going to laugh even more. This is a true story, right? And so now people are like, "You really need to make an audiobook." And I said, Lord, I'm out of work. That's like $5,000-$6,000, whatever. He says, call your friend Rick. So my friend Rick Larimore at One Sequoia Studios in Burbank, he's been a recording studio guy for 30 years. He works at, all the big studios, movies, and all that stuff. I'm like, Lord, I can't ask Rick for a $5,000-$6,000 favor. And the Lord says, Rob, you arguing with me about David. You arguing with me about Paul. Now you're arguing with me about Rick. You keep asking, why are you wasting my time if you're not going to say yes when I give you the answer? So talk about the yes effect. I go, okay, Lord, I'll say yes, and I'll call Rick. I call Rick next day. Hey, Rick, how you doing? He goes, hey, Rob, what's going on? I said, hey, just seeing how you're doing and stuff. He goes, hey, by the way, congratulations. I saw you published your book out there. I saw it on the internet. And so I said, yeah. I said, appreciate that much. I said, people keep telling me I need to do an audiobook. Taffiney. I didn't say another word. All of a sudden, he goes, dude. He goes, I got a freaking recording studio right in my house. He goes, be here at 9 in the morning. He says, I'll set it all up, and all you got to do is hit the record and stop button. It'll take me a couple of months because I got a job over at one of the big studios now on a movie. He says, as soon as I get that, I'll get your thing. We'll get it up on Audible, all the specs, everything will be right. Just come on over.
Wow. I
come over the next day. I record for 5 hours. Still needed more to go. And the next day I came back 4 hours. So 9 hours. It comes out to 4. So it shows you how much he cut out. It's a 4-hour book. He had to cut out 5 hours of my mistakes.
Wow.
Calls me up a month later. There it is on Audible. It's now a best-selling audiobook. This is how God taught me to say yes. Stop arguing with me. I don't care if it makes sense to you, Rob. I'm God. You're Rob. And there's a reason why you're Rob, because you're not as good as figuring things out as me.
Right.
And I don't need you to figure things out, Rob. I just need you to say, Lord, I need your help. And when I tell you what direction to go in, guess all you need to say is, yes. It's that simple.
It's so simple. Not always easy, but super simple.
Right? And so now, with my sobriety, I've been praying, and I said to the Lord, I said, what do you want me to do with all this sobriety? He said, Rob, you're not just going to go to some 12-step meetings once in a while and help 10, 12, 20 guys out. I need you to help. I gave you 32 years plus of sobriety. I need you to help as many people as possible. And I have. I've worked with everyone from the homeless to, A-list Hollywood celebrities, whoever. I've helped everybody in between because I focus my sobriety on God first.
Right.
Right. And I do use the 12 steps and stuff. That works for me. And I start off every morning with prayer and meditation. Even my cat waits for me. If I don't get to my prayer and meditation fast enough, my cat starts whining if I'm taking too long because she knows the value of that. My partner gets up and she realizes the value. When we say yes and lead by example, we don't have to say stuff. It's the way we live our life, right? And so I write this book. He had told me to write this book, and this is the coolest thing. My dad passed. That wasn't the coolest thing that my dad passed. It was his time, and it passed wonderfully. But I get this thought at 30 years sober. I'm up in Rhode Island, and you go to AA meetings and different things like that, or recovery meetings, wherever people go to get their medicine. And people are always like, yeah, that cop that stopped me that night I was drinking, if I had only taken the left turn instead of the right turn, and all these excuses. Nobody ever wants to take responsibility for their actions.
Yeah.
It's always somebody else's fault. Well, I thought the same thing. I'm like that rat son of a gun that saved me, that arrested me. And it hit me. After my dad passed, I'm at his gravesite in Rhode Island, and it hit me. You know what? You were so lucky your last night of driving. Taffiney, I was driving like you could not find a worse driver in the world, never mind just America that night. I was horrible. I mean, I was driving on people's front lawns, of people on the side streets were going too slow. I mean, how I did not harm myself or hurt another human being is only by his grace. And so this guy, I said, you know what, I'm going to try to find the officer that pulled me over, and I need to go thank him for having the courage to say yes, to pull me over and to do his job to serve and protect the community from me.
Wow.
And I deserved to be pulled over. Thank God he did. Mm-hmm. So I called the police station. They're like, he retired 10 years ago. If he arrested you back in 1992, and so we'd have to go on microfilm and all this to find him. Our computer systems changed. Literally a couple hours later, they call me and say, here's his name. Wouldn't you know it? His first name is Robert. What's my first name? Robert. He goes by the nickname of Bud. My dad was Captain Bud.
Oh, my goodness.
He moved to my hometown of Coventry, Rhode Island. He got involved with real estate. That's how we found him on the thing. My mom was the #1 real estate agent in Coventry, Rhode Island. She helped everybody. I call this guy and I say, hey, I went to your office. It's closed. He said, yeah, when COVID happened, we all just moved our offices to our houses and stuff. We all just work out of our house. I said, well, you work in real estate. Did you know Ginny? He goes, Ginny? He goes, yeah, she helped me with all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. This guy's now a multimillionaire. My mom, without knowing, helped the guy that saved her son's life to become a multimillionaire.
You can't make this stuff up.
And here is the picture of this gentleman. I got invited to his house. He looks like the starting tackle for the Tennessee Titans. Huge, huge guy, Robert Bud Latham. Every year now I text him when I have my sober birthday, and I say, thank you, 32 years. Thank you, 31. You know, I go up every year. And it was so cool. I was standing there, Taffiney, and there's this big guy. You can see it. The picture in it really shows. I'm 5'9". This guy was like, you know, and he looks at me and he just has tears in his eyes. And he says, you know, that was so cool of you. He goes, everybody just wants to tell us how horrible we are. And for you to do that. And I said, well, Officer Bud, because you had the courage to do your job and serve and protect what you were getting paid to do that night and get me, this menace, off the street, I've been able to stay sober for 30 years now, and through that, I've been able to help hundreds and hundreds of people have better lives, and through that, each one of them has been able to help dozens of people. So the fact that you said yes, the yes effect, and you said, yes, I'm going to pull this guy over. Yes, I'm going to do my job. Yes, I'm going to accept the challenge to put on this badge and have the courage to help protect my community and keep people safe. Because you said those yeses, you have no idea the amount of people that you have helped have a better life by your yes effect. I mean, it's incredible. We just don't know. And so now I recently started a sober coaching program for individuals and corporations, anywhere from the janitor to CEOs. And so I'm starting to get involved in making contacts around East Tennessee, Nashville area, Knoxville, wherever it is, that I can go and be of value, because I have really worked hard at this. And as people that know me know, tell me, you're the guy that needs to tackle the CEOs, but you're also the guy that really helps the janitors as well and everybody in between. You know, and the biggest part of it that I have found out is listening. I will meet somebody at a meeting or somewhere in public, and I'll see that they're going through a challenge. I'll say, you know what, let's grab a soda, a water, whatever you want. Let's go sit in the park. When it was in L.A., it was a lot easier because it was always warmer most days. We don't have the rain like we have in Knoxville.
Very true.
Oh, my gosh. We got some serious storms out here. But nonetheless, I would sit there for 3-4 hours just listening. And they would get done and they go, oh, my God, I feel so much better. And you know what they say? You as a counselor would know, I finally found somebody who would just listen to me. I've been trying to share my story my whole life, and everybody wants to give me a solution. Nobody will just listen. And so I just say, if somebody is out right now listening to us and I can be of value to you, check out my website. I'm sure I gave you guys the information. You'll put that up there. Just contact me, because, God brought Taffiney and I here. He had me say yes to all the stories I've shared. He had Taffiney say yes. Yes, God said, ask Rob to come up, from Knoxville. And she said, hey, we want to come up. And I'm like, yes. So there's a lot of yeses. So if you're sitting at home right now, I'm saying to you, this life can be different, and it can be much different in a wonderful way. I was this homeless addict, lost everything, living on the Greyhound bus station in Fort Lauderdale, and now here I am in Nashville, Tennessee on this beautiful day, hanging out with Taffiney Williams and an amazing crew behind the scenes. Everybody is just so into being the best human being they can. It's incredible, right? And my story may be able to help you. It's just my story. Just my story. And if you don't know that I know, I don't see if I can find the pictures fast enough, but my younger brother, who, and it's all themed it's all themed after cruising. So there's my young brother, David. David saved my life, got 4 years sober, and this cunningness of alcoholism and drug addiction told David that he could drink again like a normal person, and he did, and 8 months later we buried him. He left behind an 18-month-old daughter. I also was the only actor besides the regular cast to have a part on Phil Hartman's last show. If you remember that show on NBC and the tragedy that happened from there, and so that was, I did not know the last time that I said goodbye to Phil after that show. So it's Lost on a Sinking Ship, because Sinking Ship was the name of the last episode that Phil was on. And, we had never taken a picture in 4 years of working together, but they dressed us up in the same outfits. They costumed the wardrobe department. These are from the Titanic movie.
Wow.
And I said, Phil, we look so darn good together tonight. We've never taken a picture in 4 years, and this is our one and only picture in 4 years that Phil and I took. It was 20 minutes before our last show on the sinking ship.
Wow.
And if I could, I don't know, I'm sure we're running out of time, but there is a story in here, Lost, escaping a great white tragedy. Some of you may remember, especially people here in Nashville would remember, musicians, when Great White went to play at this spaghetti restaurant or this little lounge up in West Warwick, Rhode Island, the Station nightclub, years ago, when they lit pyrotechnics and the whole place burned down in 6 minutes and 100 people died and 200 people had all kinds of horrible things. And I just want to share, if you're at home and you're not getting what you want, it's because God probably has a much better plan. And I wanted the job on the biggest radio station in Rhode Island, the rock station. I was up all night snorting an 8-ball of cocaine, and I don't even know why I answered the phone, but I was out of work from one radio station, and the program director of that station calls, and the program director doesn't call unless they want to hire you. And after a few minutes, she could figure out that Rob was whacked. And anyways, I don't get the job. They hire a young guy, Michael Gonzalez. I had the worst resentment against that gal for years. I get 10 years sober, and all of a sudden I turn on the news, the station nightclub fire, and Michael Gonzalez was the MC of the night, and he was one of the ones that got burnt and had to be identified by dental records. And, I pray for Michael, because what happened is he and I actually, before I moved to California, actually became friends. We had some of the same circles that we hung out. And when I heard that, and it's like I was angry for years at God not giving me what I wanted. And now I thank him. I pray for Michael, and that's all I can do for him now. And I just say, thank you, Lord, for, helping me to do things I didn't want to do to get me to where I finally said yes.
I am so excited I'm going to take the opportunity to read your book as well. I'm sure that there's so many nuggets in there that I'll be able to glean from. One of the things I'm reminded as you were sharing this, the Word of God tells us in Revelation 12:11 that the enemy was defeated by the blood of the Lamb and the words of our testimonies.
Oof, yes.
When we choose to say yes to our healing, then we can say yes to telling our story. When we say yes to telling our story, we can then say yes to helping other people see a face of hope. Yes. Because if he did it for me, he'll do it for you. And he's no respecter of persons.
Right.
Thank you so much for being here today. I look forward to all that God is continuing to do in and through your yes.
Thank you, Taffiney. What a blessing. Thank you so much.
All righty. All right, that's all we got for today.